Good evening and welcome to the April 10th, 2018 City Council meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and Vicki, if you'd be so kind as for roll call.
Councilmember Medina.
Here.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Here.
Mayor Medina.
Here. Lori Greenberg, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have two announcements. The first one is Recology San Bruno. We will host a free compost giveaway to celebrate Earth Day on Saturday, April 21st from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Beckner Shelter in City Park. Most important, if you'd like some free compost, you got to bring your own bucket, so keep that in mind. Irene, would you like to announce and go into, please?
We do this announcement all the way up, leading up to Beautification Task Force Operation Clean Sweep, which is the first Saturday of May. And this week I brought the new signs that are going up. So if you live in San Bruno and want to help advertise this, we have this sleeve that goes on a metal frame that's out there, and you can stick it in your lawn. And if your neighbor would also do that, take a couple. So we hope to spread the word and have a great turnout this year.
And again, that'll be the first Saturday in May at May 5th at 9 a.m. City Park.
Yes, and you can register online. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have two presentations this evening. The first is to present a proclamation declaring April 8th through the 14th, 2018 as National Public Safety Communicators Week. And I'd like to turn this over to the Chief at this time.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. Yes, this week is National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, otherwise known as National Dispatcher Week. With last week's events fresh in our mind, much was made of our response time to that critical incident that we responded to. And while that was exceptional, it would not have been possible without the dispatchers and call takers that serve us on a daily basis at the San Bruno Police Department. It also illustrated the value of a local dispatcher and dispatch center. They're familiar with the area, the officers that were responding, and how to manage that situation was invaluable. The dispatchers that work for the San Bruno Police Department are truly first responders. They do a job that I freely admit that I would never be able to do. They often are handling multiple telephone calls while talking to multiple officers at multiple areas of the city all at one time. We put a lot of demands on them, and they respond with flying colors on a regular basis. The person who manages our dispatchers and call takers as well as our records division is Shannon Rohach. I'd like to invite her up to talk a little bit about what they do.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Medina and council members. My name is Shannon Rohach. I was recently promoted to the position of Communications and Records Supervisor with the San Bruno Police Department. I have been with the police department for over 16 years, and I was working primarily as a dispatcher during that time. Sitting, I guess, over in that direction, we have some of our dispatchers here tonight. The San Bruno Police Dispatch Center represents over 57 years of experience total. During Dispatch Appreciation Week, we are able to acknowledge the dedicated and hardworking people behind the mic that don't always get the recognition that they should. Although this is but 1 week out of the year, we should always be thankful for these fine women and men every day. Most of you are familiar with the job demands of law enforcement and fire personnel. The job of a dispatcher is hard, it's stressful, and it can be emotionally draining. These dispatchers that serve the people of San Bruno are strong, capable, hardworking, and dedicated individuals. We saw that this last week, especially during the YouTube shooting incident. As is usually the case during the day shift, one person was in the dispatch center when the initial call came in of an active shooter. She immediately needed help. I was able to sit next to her in the dispatch center to assist in answering some of the 200 phone calls we received within the first 2 hours of that incident. We are also fortunate enough to have a virtual dispatch center that seamlessly allows Burlingame Police Department dispatch to help answer our phone calls during a major emergency. Thankfully, that was in place. The volume of calls and the amount of radio traffic that was received was an amazing amount, and those people were necessary. Each one of these people that are sitting here and some that couldn't be here tonight showed up to work that day during their off-duty time to help at some point and after that incident, even if only to allow a dispatcher to get up and walk away from the terminal for a little while to just have a break. Sometimes the additional people there just gave us a chance to get food for the staff. This is yet another major incident the police department and the community we serve has had to endure. It won't be the last, and thankfully we will have these outstanding dispatchers there to take the call and handle the radio. Sorry, this is the part where I get emotional.
That's fine.
Aaron, Damaris, Tracy, Jackie, and Robert, these are the members of the Police Department Dispatch Center team. We are small but mighty, and I'm proud of their dedication, the efficient work that they do, the support they have for each other, and they should be commended for all of the work that they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. It's almost over. I think this might be my first proclamation as mayor, and
nice.
I'm privileged to present it to you, Shannon, and to the team. We know far too well what happened last Tuesday. I know I speak for the council, that this mayor and this council, and this community was very proud of what all did in that department for YouTube, for the community, the residents of the neighborhood. It also is one thing to acknowledge the whole team, and we are. And we're acknowledging that for the professionalism, the dedication, the protection that you offer, because you're the first line that person calls. But also, Aaron, I know you don't like getting singled out. So I've heard. You were there last Tuesday. You also were the person that was there 2010 with the explosion. You've walked in some heavy shoes during those times. And you sit here today, very, very quiet, very reserved, but I can't tell you, it's each one of you in this department and each one of you that sit in that control room that make us proud, make me extremely proud to be mayor. So Shannon, with my honor, I will bring this and present this to you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a second proclamation declaring April 22nd through the 28th as West Nile Virus and Mosquito and Vector Control Awareness Week. I can read the proclamation, but I'd rather hear from Robert. Robert's going to tell us about the open house. Robert's going to tell us a little bit, I hope, as far as just a reminder with the rains and obviously keeping things dumped out. And I know I noticed that on my way out today, so I took care of that at the house. So, but Robert, if you would come up and tell us a little bit about the April 22nd through 28th and also the open house that's occurring on Rollins.
I prepared a few words. Honorable Mayor Medina and Council, on behalf of the San Mateo County Mosquito and Vector Control District, I want to thank you for your, this proclamation recognizing the week of April 22nd through the 28th, 2018 as West Nile Virus and Vector Control Awareness Week here in San Bruno. With your continued support, the citizens of San Bruno can continue to be part of the success in keeping West Nile virus and other vector problems to a minimum. Secondly, I want to invite the San Bruno Council, the staff, and citizens to attend the district's open house April 26th from 4 to 7 at 1351 Rawling Road in Burlingame. Excuse me, and see firsthand and close up the tools operation uses and the lab support tools that test for West Nile virus and other diseases. The district is very appreciative of the continued support of the council, of Connie Jackson as city manager, the staff, the Parks Department throughout the year with the support that they give you and the citizens to, if they see the dead birds when it's high dead bird season, they have been calling those in. We've had some in the past in the park, and the Parks Department has been very instrumental in getting some of those reports in. So it's just, we're all on a team, and you're the leader of the team, you as mayor and the council, so the district really appreciates what you continue to do. So hopefully we'll see a few of you between 4 and 7 on the 26th, and I'll be happy to show you around a little bit, or you can see some of the things going on.
Thank you. Robert, as we give you the proclamation, Mr. Medina, would you please present this to Robert for me? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Medina.
Thank you very much, Robert, and thank you for being our representative on the district. We appreciate it.
Item 5, consent calendar. All items are considered routine or implement an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested.
Through the chair,
Yes, Michael, please.
I noticed we had a revision of item 5F on the dais, and I was wondering if we could get an explanation of what changes were made.
Okay, we'll pull 5F.
If we can actually get an explanation
Oh.
up front, then we can just do them all together.
Okay.
We don't need to pull it. If we just,
City Attorney, we good with that?
was there any significant?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Explanation of what?
We have a copy of 5F, which is the sidewalk.
You're missing a page of it. Is that
Is
the issue?
Well, I was just wondering why we got,
It has all this information, the other one doesn't
okay.
have all this.
So there was just additional information.
Yeah,
provided.
so
Good enough.
apparently the version that you received electronically was inadvertently omitted page 2,
Okay.
and that was on your dais tonight. So it's just the rest of the story.
Okay.
In a nutshell, the action requests your authority to enter into a contract for our annual sidewalk repair program. In this case, the apparent low bidder was rejected for a non-responsive bid in that it did not include all of the information that was necessary and didn't demonstrate the necessary requirements for award of a contract. As such, we've moved to the second low bidder, which in this case is the actual low bidder. The work to be performed is outlined in the staff report for sidewalk offsets that are the city's responsibility within a certain range. I'm sorry, I'm not remembering precisely. But this is a continuation of a program that has been in effect annually for a number of years and that has provided the opportunity for the city at least to begin to make a dent in those locations that the code vests under the city's responsibility to minimize and eliminate hazards.
And then also there is an item on the consent, item G, just for information. It's a letter of opposing Senate Bill 827 regarding the planning and zoning Transit Ridge housing projects. That's a bill that Scott Wiener has introduced, and that position is asking council for an authorization for a letter to oppose that bill. Any action on consent?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
That was quick. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. There are no public hearings, and there are no reports of committee commissioners or boards.
Item 8, public comment. On items not on the agenda, it is the council's policy to refer matters raised in this forum to staff for investigation and/or action where appropriate. The Brown Act prohibits the council from discussing or acting upon any matter not agendized pursuant to state law.
Any speaker cards, Vicki? No. Are there any members of the public that are here that wish to speak on items that are not on the agenda? If not, we'll move on to conduct of business.
Item 9, conduct of business. Item 9A, receive report on the feasibility analysis for a citywide fiber-to-home upgrade to the San Bruno cable system and provide direction to staff.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City
City Manager.
Council, over the last several months, the City Council has expressed an interest for staff to bring back information that would inform you with respect to an interest among the community for the city to upgrade and update its cable system to provide a state-of-the-art fiber-to-the-home system citywide. As the City Council is aware, the city has, through its cable operations, has tiptoed into this next frontier in terms of the expansion and evolution of technology by building a fiber-to-the-home network at the Shelter Creek condominium complex, roughly 1,300 units. And currently, the city is in the process of completing a fiber-to-the-home upgrade at the Peninsula Place condominiums, and will soon be actively building a similar system at the Crystal Springs Terrace apartment complex. We put our toe into the fiber-to-the-home technology in these specific locations, as you may recall, because the dense construction in condominium projects allows us to efficiently build and reach a critical mass of subscribers whom we can encourage to utilize our system and/or to upgrade to a faster internet speed that the fiber-to-the-home technology provides. As I indicated, the City Council has expressed an interest in exploring a further deployment citywide of fiber-to-the-home. And as this is a very expensive proposition, we asked a industry expert to provide us with a feasibility analysis using Shelter Creek, which has been completed as an opportunity to take a real live example in our community of the deployment of fiber-to-the-home and to compare results and operations at that location, both during and post construction of the fiber-to-the-home network, compare that to results that we're receiving elsewhere in the community, not currently served by fiber-to-the-home. As the City Council is aware, other providers have increasingly deployed technologies that have provided stiff competition to San Bruno Cable, which enjoyed for the many first years, the first probably 3 decades of its existence in San Bruno, enjoyed a relatively non-competitive environment. Over the last 10 to 15 years, competition has incrementally increased to the point where we have another provider building fiber-to-the-home as we speak, and that competition is resulting in a significant loss of customers. So taking the Shelter Creek example allowed us to compare what is going on in the rest of the community with the reality of a fiber-to-the-home system under the operation and control of San Bruno Cable. I'm pleased to just introduce this presentation tonight by saying that analysis has demonstrated, the analysis for which we contracted has demonstrated a relatively positive result. Our consultant, Steve Blum, is here tonight. Steve is an industry expert with TELUS Ventures Associates. who has developed and who utilized a model that allows for a precise financial analysis that produces results that he can represent to you tonight in some detail, that answers the questions that we asked. In other words, using the Shelter Creek example as a test case, what might we expect in the areas of subscriber take, revenue increase, and other metrics? What might we expect on a citywide basis, and what might that allow us to project for a payback period for the roughly $10 million additional investment that would be required to bring fiber to the rest of the San Bruno community. And before I turn the presentation over to Steve, and I'm sorry, I'm going to need to ask you, Steve, to introduce yourself with your credentials.
Sure.
Because I'm sorry that I didn't bring your bio with me tonight. Talking about the $10 million investment, I encourage the council to remember that the purpose of tonight's agenda item is to allow you to hear firsthand from Mr. Blum the results of his analysis, for you to ask questions and to engage in any discussion you might like with him. What is specifically not on the agenda tonight is a decision point where this item is not agendized for you to provide a specific decision, a go or no go, with a future investment in fiber to the home deployment. Instead, what staff is seeking is your direction regarding any further exploration of this concept and the possibility of this investment and this initiative citywide in San Bruno. I mentioned the cost at approximately $10 million to build the entire rest of the community with fiber to the home. And in mentioning that, I also need to remind the City Council that there is a current situation of financial deficit in the San Bruno cable enterprise that is a business type operation that we operate under the city's umbrella, but separated from the city's general fund activities. That deficit, coincidentally, is currently roughly in that same $10 million amount. That deficit accrued over a number of years, approximately 12 years, during which technological advancement and the need for the city's incremental investment did not result in returns to the investment that was necessary in order simply to keep up and to maintain a system that was able to sustain its to sustain itself within the current competitive environment. We specifically did not ask Mr. Blum to evaluate the deficit or strategies to address the deficit. We asked him strictly to focus on the fiber to the home opportunity and the investment that would be required to deploy fiber. As such, should the City Council wish to pursue this concept further, staff would strongly recommend that your direction and your next step would include the interest and the need to hear back from us on a more comprehensive analysis of the financial issues associated with fiber to the home, and specifically how staff might recommend, or what options staff might bring forward and recommend to you to finance a fiber to the home initiative. Jim O'Leary, our interim finance director, is here with us tonight and has done some preliminary work on that topic. He's prepared to provide some preliminary information if that's of interest to the City Council following Mr. Blum's report. But we recommend that we do not have detailed analysis for you tonight, and would be prepared to bring that back as a subsequent conversation with the City Council at a later date, should you have the interest to move forward any further with a consideration of fiber to the home. So with that, I'll introduce Mr. Blum, ask him to introduce himself a little bit, and then I guess there is one more thing to say, and that is that Mr. Blum provided the results, preliminary results of his analysis to the Cable Subcommittee of the City Council about 3 weeks ago. And this report, should the council's pleasure be to allow Mr. Blum the amount of time it will take to walk through the entire report, and I think you will find it really very interesting, and Mr. Blum's presentation style also very engaging and interesting. Will take roughly 20 minutes, so we invite your indulgence to listen to what will be a fairly detailed presentation. And certainly this council subcommittee is available to also answer any questions that you might have once the presentation is completed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. My name's Steve Blum. My company's Telus Venture Associates. I'm an independent consultant. I've been working on municipal broadband projects and analysis for the past 15 years. Prior to that, I worked in the satellite industry. I was on the launch team for what is now DirecTV. Back then it was a consortium of companies. And prior to that, worked in the TV programming, cable and satellite programming business. And before that, goes back nearly 40 years in the broadcasting industry. I have a bachelor's degree from Berkeley, master's degree in Japan's, bachelor's degree in history, by the way. I'm not an engineer. It's amazing how liberal arts helps you evaluate the world, though. A master's degree in Japan studies and an MBA. The MA is from Washington, and the MBA is from University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. And I've worked on a number of municipal broadband and particularly fiber projects, both here in the Bay Area and in Southern California. City of Riverside, Palo Alto, San Leandro are some of the cities I've worked with. I've also worked on municipal cable projects, City of Alameda, private communities, and similar projects. I guess that way. As Ms. Jackson said, I was asked to do an analysis of the results that you've seen in Shelter Creek since the fiber upgrade was completed, and compare those to the city as a whole, or the rest of the city as a whole. Overall, your revenue, and this includes Shelter Creek and everything else in the San Bruno cable system, from 2016 to 2017, your total revenue increased by about 4%. There were a couple of rate increases in that period over those 2 years. I think that you had two rate increases at about 5%. You average those out over the 2 years. The increase in your revenue isn't quite keeping pace with the rate increases themselves. But there's a comparison when you break it out into a comparison of Shelter Creek, where you have now a functioning fiber optic system, fiber to the home system, versus the rest of the city except for Shelter Creek. In the rest of the city, you've got a 3% increase. In Shelter Creek, you have a 13% increase in revenue over that same period. In both the city as a whole and in Shelter Creek, internet service is comprising a greater and greater share of of your revenue. TV revenue is tapering off in both places. The difference is that in Shelter Creek, the shift has been more pronounced. When you break it out into the two main components, TV and internet, the story starts to become a little bit clearer and a little bit starker. In Shelter Creek, it's video revenue, TV subscription revenue, and this does not include pay-per-view. This is just subscription revenue. Subscription revenue has gone up and down, but on the whole, it is above where it was in January of 2016, about 6% above, and it is generally trending upwards. On the other hand, in the rest of the city, outside of Shelter Creek, video revenue is on a marked downward trend. You can see those two upward ticks in the graph. The green line is the rest of the city. Those two upward ticks are your rate increases, and for the video portion of your business, those rate increases over time have not held. That you've ended up with less revenue at the end of the year than you had at the beginning of the year, even despite those rate increases. Internet revenue, it's a little bit better story, both in Shelter Creek and the city as a whole, but it is a significantly better story in Shelter Creek. Over the past 2 years, internet service revenue in Shelter Creek has gone up by about 60%. That's versus about a 20% gain overall in the rest of the city. But what most of that gain in internet revenue, the two biggest factors, if you look at that graph, are the two rate increases. If you look at what's happened just in the past 6 to 8 months, though, following the rate increase in August of 2017, you saw revenue in Shelter Creek continue to climb, but internet revenue in the rest of the city started to taper off. One of the reasons for the increase in internet revenue in Shelter Creek is the higher level of service that the fiber to the home upgrade was able to provide. You have two higher level packages there that are, you charge more for, you deliver faster speeds, and those were not available until your fiber to the home upgrade. They were available to some homes. You didn't start charging for them until August. Once that happened, once you started selling those packages, those higher end packages, they started accounting for an increasing share of the internet service revenue in Shelter Creek. You don't have that revenue at all in the rest of the city. When you compare the average revenue from customers in Shelter Creek and the rest of the city, the rest of the city has higher revenue per customer. Your average customer elsewhere in San Bruno buys more every month from San Bruno Cable than in Shelter Creek. But in Shelter Creek, the trend has been, in both Shelter Creek and the rest of the city, the trend has been reliably upward. So you're selling more to customers, but your revenue is still going down. And the reason for that is that in the rest of the city, your market share is dropping. At the beginning of 2016, January of 2016, in the city outside of Shelter Creek, you had about a 50% market share. That's gradually decreased to about 47% today. On the other hand, in Shelter Creek, during the time that the fiber upgrade was in process, and that upgrade process started around the first of the year in 2017, around January 2017, and in the months leading up to it, you saw a steady increase in the number of people who are taking service from San Bruno Cable. You've always had more people there taking service. You've always had a higher market share, but your market share in Shelter Creek since the fiber upgrade has increased by about 10%, gone from 60 to 70% roughly, whereas it's on a slow slide in the rest of the city. This is the most confusing graph I think I'll have today. It's confusing, but it's also important. Churn is one of the basic metrics of subscription TV, any type of subscription business. It's basically the percentage of your customers who leave you every month. There's a certain natural churn in any subscription business, particularly a cable and TV and internet service business. People will move, they'll get new jobs, they'll lose jobs, kids will move out, kids will move in. there's just a natural churn rate out there, and that's usually figured to be somewhere between 1 and 1.5% per month. If you're in the 1% range, you're doing very well. If you're over the 1.5% range, you have cause to start to worry and ask yourself why. The graph jumps all over the place because churn is also seasonal. If you look at where the dips are in the graph, those tend to come in the summer months, for example, and summer tends to be a little bit more volatile in terms of people moving in and moving out and changing service. But if you just take the beginning and end of the period, January and February of 2016, and compare it to the last 2 months of the period, January and February of 2018, you've got a good apples-to-apples comparison there. The 2 months, in those 2 months, in 2016, Shelter Creek had a 1.6% churn rate. That you can think of churn as trying to run up a downward escalator. You're trying to grow a business. You're trying to not lose business. Churn is the force that's pushing back on you. It's the people who leave every month that you have to replace just to stay even. In Shelter Creek, in January 2016, that rate was 1.6%, just a little bit over what you would consider to be the natural churn rate. In January, February of 2018, just a couple of months ago, that had dropped to 1%, at the bottom end of the natural churn rate. That is a significant change. If you look at the trend of those two lines, the green line being the rest of the system and the red line being Shelter Creek, over that 2-year period, the trend line in Shelter Creek is down, the trend line in the city as a whole is up. And that's a reflection of the take rate, this slide I showed you just before. Overall, you're gaining market share in Shelter Creek. Overall, you're losing it in the rest of the city. And the churn rate essentially reinforces that. But we dove a little deeper into the churn rate, and I've got a graph here that is not confusing in the least. This is the churn that's due to competition from AT&T. In Shelter Creek, it's been virtually non-existent. Those little blips you see there are one person deciding to switch from San Bruno Cable to AT&T. Over the course of 2 years, you had 3 people in Shelter Creek. That's essentially nothing. That's just sort of the normal back and forth in any business. And you had a rate that wasn't much above that in the rest of the city until this past summer. And something happened in the marketplace, and staff tells me AT&T finished a fiber upgrade, or at least started advertising a fiber upgrade. I don't know whether they've actually are providing direct fiber to the home service to all the locations. They have a range of products they call fiber, and some of them are fiber, but some of them are still copper-based. But there's fiber somewhere in the system, so they call it fiber. But in any event, you have a marked increase in the number of people who are leaving San Bruno Cable and switching over to AT&T service as AT&T is rolling out fiber to the home service in the city. So just to summarize, Shelter Creek has a much better revenue growth and market share growth than the rest of the system. 13% year over year versus 3% in the rest of the system. Internet service, both in Shelter Creek and elsewhere in the service, is accounting for a greater and greater share of revenue, and that's true generally in the industry. Your market share in Shelter Creek is rising. It's sliding in the rest of the city. Average revenue per customer is trending up in Shelter Creek, slightly down in the last few months in the rest of the system, flat to down. And you've seen significant improvements over the past 2 years in the churn rate, in that downward escalator that you have to fight against every month. You've seen significant improvements in Shelter Creek. So we asked ourselves, well, suppose you upgraded the entire city to fiber to the home, and some, not necessarily all, but suppose some of the benefits, some of the improvements you've seen in Shelter Creek carried over into the rest of the city. And we ran a couple of scenarios. And the basic difference between the two scenarios is how does internet revenue increase in the rest of the city? The internet revenue in Shelter Creek, since you finished the upgrade in August and you started billing people for the full service they were receiving, internet service revenue went up 11% between August of 2017 and February of 2018, 11% increase. The TV revenue, as you saw in the graph, it doesn't increase there, but you are holding your own in Shelter Creek in terms of revenue. The decline in TV revenue stopped. That is just the simplest, the most cleanest comparison we can make, is to say, okay, you had 11% revenue increase since full fiber upgrade in Shelter Creek. Let's make that same assumption for the rest of the city. Second scenario we ran was basically to say, okay, let's say it's 20%, because it's still climbing in Shelter Creek, and since you began the fiber upgrade, just in the past year, you've seen a 30% rise in internet revenue in Shelter Creek. So a 20% is not too out of line. It's more optimistic than 11%. It is more pessimistic than what you've actually experienced in Shelter Creek. Made a few other assumptions, that the cost of the fiber upgrade would be around $10 million. We assume pay-per-view revenue would hold steady. It has mostly. You can make an argument that once you have a fiber upgrade, on-demand service revenue will rise, but we just assumed it to be flat. We assumed that your interest rate is 4.5%. We didn't make any assumptions at all about where the money might come from, but if you go out and either borrow $10 million or take $10 million out of savings or wherever you get it, we assume the cost of that money would be 4.5% a year. We ran the projections in constant dollars. We didn't make any assumptions about inflation. That just lets us make consistent comparisons over the years. And we assumed that there would be a certain amount of increased expense because if you're getting more revenue, you're providing more service. Along with more service comes more expense. Arguably, you could see your expenses drop if you move to a full fiber system. You won't be supporting two separate systems. Staff has made some estimates as to what the lower cost of operations would be in a fiber system. We did not include that in the projections, mainly to be conservative. We also didn't try to do an analysis of the various alternatives that are out there. Principally an upgrade to what's called DOCSIS 3.1, but it's the most current level of cable technology, conventional cable technology. That wasn't included in the analysis either. So anyway, we ran two separate analyses. The basic difference is the two basic assumptions are internet revenue would increase, TV revenue, the decline in TV revenue that you're seeing citywide would flatten out after a couple of years, as it has in Shelter Creek. The result of that analysis, just running it out and applying the 4.5% discount rate, shows that if you assume a 20% citywide increase just in internet revenue, and the TV revenue, the slide in TV revenue, more or less comes to a halt after a couple of years. If you assume an 11% increase, you get to pay back in about 26, 27 years. If you assume a 20% increase, that payback comes at about year 14. The minimum revenue increase to get to pay back within 30 years is a 10% increase. So if you just saw a 10% increase in internet revenue, you'd get to pay back in 30 years. 30 years is usually considered to be the minimum lifespan of a fiber system. I think in reality, it's the fiber itself will last much longer. Electronics need to be upgraded periodically, but that's also true of a cable system. Over time, you have to keep maintaining and replacing the electronics. So so the bottom line in this is that you can get to payback citywide if you have the improvement in internet revenue citywide that you've seen in Shelter Creek just in the first 8 months of full fiber operation. If you get to that in 27 years, if you assume that it's going to be kind of the midpoint of where your total revenue increase over the last year in Shelter Creek has been, you get to pay back in 14 years. So that is that's my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here.
Anybody? Questions from council? And I also want to see if we have people from the audience who may want to speak on this matter, but I'll ask council if they want to have any questions to start, or you want to see if we have people from the community.
We can go to the community.
I'd like to hear if there's anybody from the community.
Anybody from the audience who wants to speak on this item? Mr. Mercy.
Ryan Mersney, Keynes Avenue. I'd like to speak in support of upgrading to fiber. I understand it's an expensive system. I think it's going to be a vast improvement for our city, and not only will it pay off in the future based on the analysis, but I think will be a great civic achievement for us as a city. Also, might I suggest ways to pay for it, possibly borrowing money from ourselves from the San Bruno Community Foundation and paying a lower interest rate, but to ourselves, possibly mortgaging the property that the cable building sits on now, or even selling it for development and moving that to a less expensive property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience? Council? Michael, did you?
I'd like to hear from the subcommittee as well.
Okay. Maybe Irene can start.
Irene, would both of you wish to? I know there wasn't a per se recommendation because it's just receiving information, but would you like to add anything?
If you would you discuss a little bit about the risks involved in not doing anything?
The risk involved in not doing anything is right. Where'd it go? Come here. Oops. No, I don't want sticky keys. Here it is. This is the risk. This is the risk in not doing anything. That green line, that is on a downward trend, and if you want a single top line, headline reason for that, the reason that's going up in Shelter Creek is because people are buying more internet service and higher levels of internet service, whereas in the rest of the system, people are going to AT&T. And that's the risk of not doing anything. It's your business, the metrics I'm seeing here have, your business metrics have significantly declined in the rest of the city over the past 2 years. And there's no reason to think that's going to change if nothing else changes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Irene?
I've long supported fiber to the home, and I am excited about the possibility and the fact that we've done all the homework of this part of it. I know financing is going to be a huge factor in all this, but as he said, if we do nothing, the whole system is going to decline. We're going to be stuck with the debt that we already have with little chance of replacing it, and the citizens of San Bruno are going to be without our San Bruno cable, and I think that alone make us pause and think really hard about doing this or not. It's a fabulous system. Our service is wonderful. I don't know of any other place in all the people I know who live all over the United States that if you pick up the phone and say, my mother can't get her cable remote control to work, can you send somebody out to her that does it for free? And they're very patient, and they do it for anybody who asks. So That's one of our fabulous pieces of all this, is our service, and I don't think AT&T would ever do anything like that. So that's my comments. I could answer other questions if you wish.
Michael?
Through the chair, thank you. So, like Irene, I'm in favor of keeping our system going, and fiber is definitely the wave of the future. My concerns around what I'm seeing, and I raised this in the subcommittee meeting as well, is that the numbers to me that we're seeing are not that compelling. I mean, looking at the churn rate right now, we're talking about 0.5%, 0.5% difference, and the number, our sample set in Shelter Creek is a very small number. It's very new. I asked, and unfortunately we don't have data around demographics at Shelter Creek and how they compare to the rest of the city. So extrapolating the results there, I think, is risky at best, because I believe that demographic may, and on top of them being sort of they're a little community of their own, they actually requested San Bruno Cable to bring fiber to them. So I would expect that their rate of onboarding would be dramatically higher than the rest of the population. So there's a number of reasons why those numbers, I think, would be skewed. And just looking at the increases, I don't believe that they're as dramatic as I would hope in this thing. And again, we're only looking at revenue in these things, not really looking at number of subscribers and cost per subscriber, which I think would provide a different dimension. So as you mentioned, a big portion of those revenue increases come from rate increases and the fact that they are consuming more expensive products there. So that naturally drives that number up. So if we were to correct for that, I think, again, the numbers would be less dramatic. I think one thing that we need to consider as a council, I want to speak to the council here, but I don't want to fall off the microphone. One thing we need to consider is that there's going to be a fundamental shift in our philosophy and how we handle San Bruno Cable. Going back to its origins in 1969, it was really established as a source of revenue for the city. It was established for the purpose of contributing to the general fund and providing a service, yes, but also supplementing our operations, our other operations in the city, and allowing us not to have to raise taxes. And I believe that was something that was mentioned in the original text. But as we move into this, into modern times, it's obvious that $10 million deficit is there because the enterprise is no longer able to contribute to the city's revenue. And if we were to make this investment, I don't believe we would be able to sustain that revenue that we've always counted on. So the more we invest in San Bruno Cable, and based on the projections that I've seen, I don't think that eventually it's going to continue. It's going to continue to take away from the general fund if we have to keep investing in it. And at this point, I believe it's probably, still breaking even. But the more we invest in it, the less that might be the case. So the funding source would be critical, depending on how we choose to fund it. I don't know that going forward, we definitely can't afford to fund it from general fund. We can't supplement it. So if it can't stand alone, then it really can't stand, I don't think. And another big issue that's a concern, and probably not really reflected here, is the fact that the enterprise is saddled with the television half, not the internet, but the television half, which is steadily declining, and we have very little control over the costs. Companies like Comcast, which control the transmission and the content that they push out, have a lot more control over that. We have to pay whatever they charge us per channel, and as our subscriber base grows, it grows disproportionately because we have to pay each of these channels for every subscriber, whether or not they even watch the channel. So there's a whole other portion there that will continue to saddle the enterprise, and we're not really addressing that. So this is a very sort of clean analysis, but I think that it's a lot messier than that. So those are my thoughts. Again, I'm not against doing it. I'm just really concerned that long term, our ability to keep this going is there. The competition is going to increase. The threat from AT&T, I think, will continue to take customers away, whether or not we do fiber. A lot of people view their internet connection as a commodity, and they really don't care who they get it from. And we'll see a lot of flip-flopping. People will go to AT&T, realize that they don't have the service, and maybe some will come back, maybe some won't. But there's no guarantees there either. I think we've always seen the churn in the system. People leave, people come back, but there's no real guarantee that only having fiber will really keep us competitive. As the consultant mentioned, AT&T is also offering some hybrid system, and we alluded to the DOCSIS 3.1, which could be some sort of a hybrid system for us. So we're not looking at that. It would be a lower cost system. So I think if we want to make an investment, it would be prudent to look at that option as well, and not just put all our eggs in the fiber basket. So that's it.
Marty or Laura, you have anything to add? Marty? Comments?
I think I need a little clarification because I have a different understanding of how our funds from cable was supplementing and going to the general fund, that it isn't a drawdown on the general fund. It actually was providing funds to the city. It was just that as that amount remained the same, and we weren't investing in we haven't been keeping up with our competition. It's clear that the future is either you're going to compete or you're going to be out of business. The only way to compete is to put in the fiber. That's my take on it, and I was hoping that, and I liked all of Michael's points, just that I think the fiber, San Bruno cable is profitable, just that so much of that money was being allocated to the general fund, and I think that's really important, and I was hoping that our finance director or somebody else from staff can just provide some the narrative on that to explain that it is a revenue generator. It's just that a lot of that money was going to the general fund, and to explain how that worked out. I think that's critical for us and for the public to understand that. I understand that tonight we're at one first step before we do a comprehensive financial analysis on what it's going to take to really run San Bruno Cable more aggressively as a competing business in San Bruno. It comes down to either we advance with technology or we're going to be out of business, and then what? As we continually start losing customers. So is that possible, Mayor, to have somebody from staff to provide some comments? Yes.
City Manager.
So I can give you a general summary, and I think what I would suggest is that you task us with bringing back a more detailed response to that question. But the council member is correct. They, in very general terms, the cable enterprise has been tasked since its inception with a transfer of revenues off the top, gross revenues, into the general fund. That amount it might, in a private business, be considered owner's equity or something like that. And I think that was part of the original thought process when that structure was developed back at the inception of the enterprise. Over the last 3 to 4 years, since the deficit has reached the approximate $10 million mark, that equity transfer amount has been reduced in each year. I'd like, again, to have the opportunity to bring this back to you in a little bit more detail so we get the numbers precise. But we are no longer transferring 10% of gross revenues. We're transferring a significantly lower amount. But in very general terms, our analysis done a couple of years ago demonstrated that the amounts of transfers into the general fund over the approximately 10 or 12-year period over which the deficit emerged and then grew, the amounts that were transferred into the general fund above and beyond, I'll say for the clarity to the City Council, the city does provide a fairly robust number of services to the cable enterprise, just as we do to the water enterprise and to the sewer enterprise. Financial management, facility management in some cases, human resources management. Those services are covered through other transfers. So the enterprise does pay the general fund for services rendered, and this additional amount was transferred from the general fund. Over time, the amounts transferred into the general fund roughly equate to over the period of time that the deficit emerged, roughly equate to the amount of the deficit cumulatively. So at the City Council's initiative, we have incrementally backed off of the amounts that are currently being transferred, and there is still an amount being transferred. But we can show the City Council that information in more detail. We're not prepared to do that tonight. In general terms, the comments that you made are relatively correct, yes.
Thank you. I'm in favor of moving forward, and I strongly suggest we move swiftly. This is one of the most important things I think we can do in making sure we steady this trajectory and start getting it back up is to invest in the technology. I mean, that's the way it always is that either you advance or you fall back, and I want to be with advancing it.
Laura?
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for a thorough report. I appreciate the details that you provided in that report. And I echo some of the council members as well, and that is that we have to do something. We can't continue the status quo. To simplify it, we've got a sinking ship, and buckets of water is getting dumped out of it while we're trying to make repairs over here. And although it sounds great, we've got to make a choice. We either buy a new ship and move on, or we've got to do something. So, with that comes a lot of concerns. I echo Councilmember Salazar's comments in that it is a small sampling of a group of residents in a very it's not the typical residential area in San Bruno either. It's condos. It's in a very tight community. Communication, advertisement, very easy. Knocking on doors, dropping off doors. I mean, to get out to the residents is pretty easy in terms of communication. And they were interested and they wanted it. So there's a couple pieces there. I'm also concerned with the flat decline in television viewers. The reality is that we are changing how we view television media today. Nobody really sits and just watches TV anymore. We're on iPads, we're on computers, we're streaming, we're downloading. The service we provided 10, 20, and 30 years ago is going away. And we've also been dealt with the challenges of like comments were made too, is is television. Buying those channels at rates that, contracts and renewing, and the unknown cost in ABC and NBC and all these channels, the unknown, it's actually kind of a scary business to continue to stay in. I'm definitely in favor of researching the potential for rolling out a fiber system in San Bruno, because that seems to be really a win-win, right? It is the technology. We all walk around with these mini computers, the iPhones and the Androids. It's what we want to do, right? The flat screen televisions are all internet, right? No longer will you see cable cords going into a television. You stick up, it provides power, and voila, you're Wi-Fi watching anything you want to watch, right? So that service, there's high demand. The kids today want to stream, they're on videos, and internet is by far the direction that I think our residents are going. So I think providing a good service, there is something to the fact that we have our own company in San Bruno, and that we can go down there and walk in as a resident and get good service. That you can call them and get an appointment and not take the entire day off. I mean, we far sell, I believe, the cable service that we offer in San Bruno, that we really don't push the great service that we provide. I recently switched over to AT&T just to be an AT&T customer, because I have forever been a San Bruno cable customer, to see what kind of service is. And I experienced a couple weekends ago being sick over a few days. Horrible service. I will tell you, I had video problems all weekend long on many occasions. Never had that with my cable. So, San Bruno Cable has provided a great service, good customer service. You can get appointments. We have a great thing in San Bruno. I would hate to lose that. And I think if we crunch the numbers, we have been profitable. Yes, profits have declined over the years, but I think we can even do better. I think that getting the right staff in hired for the cable, investing in a good program, I think I see the light. I do see something. We can't do nothing, and I think, like Councilmember Medina said, this is a priority. This is something that really needs to get our focus, because doing nothing is continuing to decline in viewership and customers. So those are my comments.
Is it possible to get out of your AT&T contract?
Of course, I will be. It's only a 2-year commitment. Yeah.
I guess I'll have a few comments. Maybe because I'm sitting in the center now, I share everybody's comments. I do think the sampling, when we really talk about it, it is a very unique situation. It is it's Shelter Creek that came to us and said, please do this. If not, we're going to have to go here, but we will stand by, we will wait for you. That doesn't happen a lot in the marketing world. It just doesn't. We had their manager on site, Ronnie, who was just pushing this and through the board, and so we just had elements of marketing that you just don't get throughout the community. That's a reality. It is talking about a shift, because in essence we have other enterprise funds that have to, even with the rates and what have you, is they validate and they support those enterprises. This has not occurred, and to my knowledge, Michael, you're correct, it was established and started in order to help offset and minimize overall residential costs to the community. That was its intent. And it was its intent, of course, and I stood there as a city employee when we dedicated the cable department. I was there as a city employee, not in that department, but when they redid the system. What I've always said is we should be treating that like we do with the other aspects of like our vehicles, equipment reserve. We're not putting reserves away in order to replace those pieces of very expensive equipment at times as we used to. And we're going to get yourselves behind, and then you go into debt. So I think it has to be a very big shift if you even go down that. Are you looking for those supplements that have been going to the general fund to discontinue? Then how does the general fund take care of that? So I think it's not as quick and simple as let's hit a button and go. In my world, I think it really has to be looked at. The funding source is critical. I know that you were averaging about a 4.5 interest rate is what the suggestion was, but how do we do it? I think what I'm hearing from the council is that obviously we really need to take a deeper dive, and I think we need the analysis and the hard questions to get a true fact and history of what the cable department was established, what it has been doing, and how do we look at this? Because if we're going to stop the additional monies to the general fund, though it is going in debt, and we're already minimizing that, and we have. This council has taken that action to do that. But I think you're going to have to look at it also more in the channel aspect. I think one of the things I've noticed as I've campaigned, and I can tell you and I've been up here a little bit now, but when I would walk the streets in '05 to this last race for mayor, it is night and day as far as cable TV subscribers. There are dishes everywhere. There's the AT&T fiber. So, is the whole package what we need to stay with? Is it viable? And I think I want us to make sure we're really taking a good cross-section of the community and to say, will we find those revenue results that we're actually going off on Shelter Creek? If we saw those also at Crystal Springs Terrace, if we saw those at Peninsula Place, that's fine. Are we going to see that when we start to go into other pockets of a community? That I don't know. And I think that's what I want to be more secured on, because whatever this council chooses to do, I think we're going to find criticism for going more in debt. We could find criticism for not doing anything. And we could find criticisms as Councilman Salazar said, can we stand? So in essence, it's not a simple question of, is it good? Well, of course it is. But there's a lot of other, I think, global things we need to look at in order to ensure it's the right future for the city, the system, and us providing all the other services that we do. So those are my comments.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
So I think what we're all saying is that, and it sounds like there's a consensus that we want to do something and we're very interested in going down this path. But I think you're right, and that is we need to get a good analysis of cable in its entirety, where we're at today. Can't do nothing, but we need to know that and what the facts are. So, and I'd like to see the analysis from a stat report from staff on the monies.
So what I hear, unless the council wants to say more comments, that we would like to see staff come back with the analysts, and Michael, you might want to add a little more broader perspective to that.
Through the chair, thank you. The only thing I would add is that when we start looking at funding options, that we keep a very global view of all of the other deficits that we have in the city. Marty made an issue last time about not having enough money to put up light poles. I know our streets are dramatically underfunded, our storm sewers are dramatically underfunded. So as we look forward and as we start taking some strategic actions to fund some of these things that need to get done, basic things that we as a city are responsible for, I want to make sure that we don't overextend ourselves in one area at the peril of everything else. So that would be my only request.
Did I encapsulate that okay, or Irene, do you want to?
Well, I just would like to make the comment and clarification that cable, part of the point of all this is that cable, which we probably shouldn't call it TV anymore, but cable, San Bruno Cable is a revenue-generated entity, whereas the street lights and the sidewalk replacements and all those stuff, those come from other funds, or they don't generate any revenue. So you can't. I wouldn't want to ask staff to compare apples and oranges. If we have funding mechanisms, or there's a wide variety of different ways to fund the cable enterprise and the fiber optic, then I think that's the information we need. I don't necessarily think we need a comparison between not being able to fund streetlights and not doing cable. I mean, I think they're just totally different types of things. And if you however you fund cable, that's an obligation that comes back to cable. It's not something that you don't charge somebody who doesn't have cable to help pay for cable. It's separate.
Well, 2 points. For everything that we do, we're reaching into the pockets of either the ratepayers or the taxpayers. That's the only source of income that we have. So it's either going to be a ratepayer, and in a lot of cases, they're the same people. So the people of San Bruno are going to pay for it one way or another. The other point is that the city's credit rating is going to be impacted by whatever debt we take on, whether it's on the cable side. And actually looking at the amount of debt that the cable enterprise is carrying, we would probably be wiser to borrow the money from the general fund, on the general fund side, with the city's credit rating, rather than try to do it from the cable enterprise's weaker position. So I think all of those things, they all bear out. I mean, if we start overextending ourselves, we become less attractive as a borrower to the markets. And so if we do extend ourselves $10 million to do this, that may impact our ability to raise funds to do something else, something different.
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying, and I think it's commendable that what you are saying, and it's certainly prudent to do that. I think what maybe a different way of saying it is, let's ask staff to come back with as many ways of funding fiber to the home as throughout the city as possible, and then we can analyze them and which is the most feasible and which is the best way to go, and get their recommendation, and then come back with the caveat that they keep all those things in mind that you said. Mm-hmm. But the other piece is, people are going, the ratepayers aren't just paying for, paying. They're getting a service in return. It's not like they're just throwing money out. They're getting a service, and if they don't want the service, they don't pay for it. But if we don't have the service to offer, we're certainly not going to be able to pay for anything. I mean, anything related to cable. So just keep in mind that if we do nothing, our revenue is going to continue to go down, and we will have less and less opportunity to repay the debt that we do currently have. So that's just a cautionary note that way.
Marty.
Yes. Can we get a little update on how everything's going over at Peninsula Place with our next phase of expansion of fiber, so that we can kind of have an idea of how well things are going?
Well, isn't
or
that
maybe
funny?
not?
We didn't even say, come on up, and boy, that was quick. You heard fiber, you were at the podium.
And we didn't practice this either, so.
No, I was going to say. Mr. Johnson through the chair, is that okay? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Is the mic on?
Absolutely, for you, of course.
Okay. Yeah, Peninsula Place is going quite well. By the end of next week, we'll have all 48 buildings wired up, ready to go for transfer to fiber to the home. We have today I counted up about 150 transfers that are on fiber to the home out of the 840 units in Peninsula Place. So within 2 months, we'll be finished with Peninsula Place, I figure, because we'll be strictly working on hooking up customers after next week. And next week, the underground people are going to start looking at Crystal Springs. So we're starting that project, which is 447 customers. And for the $2 million that you authorized us to do, we're going to get, right now we have 1,000 customers. We'll probably get close to 600 to 700 out of Peninsula Place, and we already have in Crystal Springs over 300 connect. Penetration is high. We just want to build that so we maintain our penetration there, so AT&T will not come in there and overbuild. So it's going quite well.
Okay, with that, from the council, what I'm hearing is to go forward on some analysis to that, and you've heard some of the dialogue and discussion from council as for some of the areas of interest and or concern. I would think when this comes back, I don't know if it should go to the subcommittee, but I would think a study session would probably be the most appropriate next forum, so that we can spend the more relaxed opportunity but quality time on this topic. And I think this is something that probably my first inclination is not a 50-minute, hour study session, I think it probably requires a good hour and a half or something just to make sure that we have adequate time to converse and go over facts and figures. Does that give staff, city manager, you feel comfortable with direction?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 9B, adopt resolution authorizing purchase of internet router replacement equipment for city network, commercial businesses, school district, and San Bruno Cable residential customers in the amount of $1,676,000.
Mr. Johnson, you giving the report? Al?
Bob.
Okay, Bob?
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, the item before you is to authorize the expenditure of $1.676 million to upgrade the city's high-speed internet router network with new network design, new routers, ancillary equipment, and factory technical support. This expenditure was included in the Cable Department's 2017-18 Capital Improvement Program budget and is critical to the operation and ongoing reliability of the city and cable television networks. The city currently operates 3 network-level routers purchased in 2004 and last upgraded in 2014. This equipment routes all internet traffic, whether it be voice, video, or data, within the city's networks and to and from the department's customers to the outside of the world, and outside to the rest of the world, pardon me. The age of the equipment and ongoing factory technical support is now at issue. The last upgrade to this equipment was almost 5 years ago, and Cisco Systems last year identified this equipment as end of life and will soon cease to support it by the latter part of this year. It should be noted that the city's core router for governmental communications has already reached the end of life and support. Cisco Systems has assured staff, however, that they will continue to provide support until such time as the new equipment is installed. The equipment staff recommends to buy will be able to process over 1 million routes, up from a theoretical maximum of 100,000 routes on our current equipment. It will have greater port bandwidth capacity and more available ports for future expansion or network upgrade. These are significantly more sophisticated machines and will be able to route our traffic more efficiently. It will simplify troubleshooting and generally improve the stability of the entire system. The equipment staff proposes to purchase, along with system design, support, and a 4-hour equipment replacement window, includes approximately $1.1 million for the city's 3 network routers, approximately $160,000 for city transport routers and switches, $270,000 for design, installation, and configuration, and approximately $118,000 for updated firewall protection, which includes 2 pairs of Palo Alto Network firewall routers. All of the above costs are included in the $1,676,000 request, and I would refer council to the staff report regarding Cisco Systems discounts and their value-added reseller and support programs. I should note that staff recommends continuing the relationship with the DataLink Insight Managed Services team. This group has been providing support for city network operations for well over 10 years and has a deep understanding of the city's networks. The total cost of $1,676,000 is to be paid over 5 years through financing determined by the city's finance department, with payments of approximately $325,000 per year. Pending approval, the project would be completed by the end of this summer. Al Johnson, John Seckler, Mark Edwards, and Andrew Warren of the DataLink Insight team are available for any questions. Thank you.
Questions of council?
Through the chair.
Michael.
So, Mr. Johnson and I spent some time on the phone today, so I think technically I understand what you're doing, and it seems like a reasonable design. From what I understand of the product support cycle, even though it's end of life, end of support comes dramatically later, so we probably could extend the life of this out a little farther. I think absolute end of support is somewhere out in like 2020 for these devices, right?
For our 76 routers,
The mic. Please.
according to our contract with SmartNet, it's, the end of life is in about October of this year.
Okay, but we could extend, Cisco would allow us to extend.
Well, I'm not sure.
to-
Cisco's here to talk about that if you'd like to have them come up.
You step to the mic,
Could you
please,
come
sir?
to the mic, please?
So John Seckler with DataLink.
Thank you.
So yes, on some of the pieces, we could extend the support out through 2020, 2021. The core 4507 switch router that's supporting the city network today actually is completely will be unsupported by Cisco on the 30th of April, 2018. So we're kind of running into a problem with that.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, and so the other question then, the financing. So how does this, it sounds like this would be we would be incurring some more debt in order to pay for this. Is that correct?
Mr. O'Leary?
I think the answer to your question is there's not immediate capacity within the fund to support the $1.6 million. So financing of some manner would be necessary. Cisco itself has offered a finance package, and that was the basis for what's been included in the budget so far for the 5 years. Some analysis would indicate that we could move forward on that basis, even using for a very short period of time city funding. I would believe that if the results of further analysis for the fiber to the home that you discussed earlier, if we did some of the financing potential for that could wrap this 1.6 million into it, and I think that would probably lower the debt service and lower the annual cost if we did that. So I would try to leave that option open for financing, and in that method, if we decide in the next few months to proceed with further financing, maybe we could wrap it all together and get the best package.
Okay.
But the answer to your question is debt is required of some manner.
Of some manner. Okay. So if we decide to move forward with this, can we then stipulate that we want to hold off on actually issuing any kind of debt or making any financial decision until we have the complete picture?
Yes, and I think as long as that decision occurs relatively expediently, we don't want to hold off more than probably a few months, but that time period, I believe, is achievable. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you.
Well, I think this is for a limited period of time. The city could finance this to move forward immediately, just use internal funds until we have financing of some type in place. So I wouldn't suggest holding it up for that purpose.
Okay. And just to kind of go back to an earlier point, what happens with cable happens to the rest of the city. So we really can't hold it in isolation, because here's clearly an example where it's cable is not standing on its own, and we do have to do something to help it out. So I just wanted to make that.
Any other comments from council? Marty.
This is just like everything else. You know, we have to maintain what we have, and if we don't maintain it, it's not going to work. Well, we can't have that option of it not working. So I think we move forward and spend whatever we need to from the city funds, and as we package whatever the debt amount together, then we can go ahead and replenish the city funds. But I wouldn't want to hold this up. I think it's clear to me that we have to do it, and that's where I stand on it.
Any additional comments from the city manager or finance director on that, or the debt borrowing and all that? Just to make sure. Okay, this is action item, unless there's any other comments. Laura?
Yeah, I just had one comment. The firewall piece, I just want to make sure we're not cutting corners with the purchase of this new unit. I mean, security is so big and so important, and I want to make sure that, that our systems are protected, that regardless of what a user might do, that the infrastructure is protected. So.
No, it's okay.
Good evening. I'm Mark Edwards from DataLink Insight. Yes, we actually spec'd in the Palo Alto devices because we feel that they are one of the best units on the market today. John and I, just to give you a little bit of history, we spent, a total of 26 years at Cisco, and we pretty much bleed Cisco. The products that we spec'd in for routing and switching are Cisco products. But even with that said, we do not feel that the best thing for our customer, in this case, the city of San Bruno, is a Cisco product, and that's why we put the Palo Altos in there. It is, if you looked at the Gartner reports, you would see Palo Alto in the upper right-hand corner. It is a superior product on the market today.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. Okay, if there's no other comments, this is an action item asking for a resolution.
I'll introduce the resolution.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Davis.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye.
Item 9C, receive report and provide direction to staff regarding traffic safety and operational improvements at the intersection of San Bruno Avenue and Cherry Avenue.
Thank you.
Good night. Mr. Tan.
Sorry. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. We're here tonight to present the analysis and recommendations for the recently completed study performed by DKS Associates regarding the traffic safety and operation improvements at the intersection of Cherry Avenue and San Bruno Avenue. So just a little brief background on the intersection before we start our presentation with the recommendations and the analysis. This intersection, the slide shows the location of the intersection indicated in this blue circle, which is located about a quarter miles away from the near on-off ramps of Interstate 280. The intersection is also signalized, meaning it currently has traffic signals. And here's an aerial of the intersection as well. San Bruno Avenue has two through lanes and a left lane in both directions, and the Cherry Avenue in the northbound direction has a left turn lane and then a shared through and right turn lane. And whereas in southbound direction, this way here. It has a shared left through lane and a right turn lane. So in order to perform their evaluation, DKS researched collision data in a statewide integrated traffic record system, otherwise known as SWITRs, for a time period between August 2012 to August of 2017. A total of 14 collisions were recorded in the SWITRs for that time period, and the crashes included 5 rear ends, 5 broadsides, 2 collisions with fixed objects, 1 vehicle striking a pedestrian, and 1 unspecified collision type. So one of the incidents was the hit and run on December 19, 2016, where a pedestrian was killed while she was walking across the San Bruno Avenue in the marked crosswalk. Although a thorough police investigation confirmed that there were no visual obstructions or other features that caused or contributed to the accident, the city nevertheless retained DKS associates to conduct a review of the intersection and identify options that could potentially make the intersection safer for pedestrians and vehicles. So the overall goal of the study is to improve the safety at the intersections. So as part of the evaluation, DKS conducted site visits to observe traffic at the intersection for about 10 hours, review the intersection geometry, and analyze the intersection operations using traffic engineering software. The results of their analysis is documented in a technical memorandum that contained various recommendations. And during their site visit, they observed several issues. So one of them was the aggressive driver behavior, mainly poor yielding behavior related to drivers making left turns from both directions of Cherry Avenue onto San Bruno Avenue. So as you can see in the slide here, both cars are trying to make a left turn, and then they are improperly yielding, through the intersection there. The other is the drivers traveling northbound on Cherry, which is the blue car, turning left to westbound San Bruno Avenue, and they act uncertain to oncoming traffic, which is the red car coming, because they are unable to determine if the drivers are traveling these, southbound on Cherry are going to make a left turn or continue straight into the intersection. And the last is the pedestrian waiting on the northwest, southwest, and southeast corners can be difficult for drivers to see. So after completing their evaluations, DKS determined 4 recommendations for improvements at the intersection, and Michael will now provide the details on each of those recommendations.
The pointing's not working. It's not working? No. So before I get into a discussion of the recommendations, I want to quickly provide an overview of the definition of a permissive left turn, because we're going to be using that term a lot throughout the rest of the presentation. So a permissive left turn is when the left turn movement is allowed to proceed at the same time as traffic in the opposite direction. The driver making the left turn is shown a green circular signal and is required to wait for a gap in the traffic before they can make a turn. They're required to yield to all other traffic that is going in the other direction. So in this figure, you'll see on the screen the blue car is making the permissive left turn. It's required to yield to both the red car that's traveling straight in the opposite direction and to the yellow car that's making the right turn, and to the pedestrians that are using that crosswalk on the west side of the intersection. Permissive left turn control is what is currently used for both directions of Cherry Avenue. So DKS Associates considered a number of different improvements for the intersection. Based on their analysis, DKS is recommending 4 improvements for consideration by the city. The first recommended improvement is to modify the median on Cherry Avenue on the north side of the intersection to create a new southbound left turn only lane. On the slide, you can see the area that's highlighted by the orange circle. That's the area where the median is to be modified. So there's currently only 2 southbound lanes. That left turn lane there is new. Modifying the median will improve the capacity for southbound direction, which will help minimize congestion at the intersection regardless of any other changes that may be implemented.
And modifying the median will also reduce the uncertainty that the northbound drivers are experiencing because the southbound left turns and the straight through movements will be separated into different lanes. So that's the yellow and the red cars are now in different lanes. This is illustrated on the slide. Well, I just said that. All right. Next slide. The second recommended improvement is to add a leading pedestrian interval for the two crosswalks across San Bruno Avenue. With a standard pedestrian signal operation, the pedestrian receives a walk signal at the same time as the adjacent vehicles, which may be making a right turn. And you can see on the slide, on the panel on the left, they're both got the red light, and then when you get to the panel on the right, there are cars receiving the green light, and the pedestrian receives a walk signal at exactly the same time. So with the leading pedestrian interval, the pedestrian receives the walk signal about 3 to 7 seconds before the adjacent vehicle receives their green light. The idea is to give the pedestrian a chance to move into a position in the crosswalk where they are more visible to drivers before the drivers are allowed to start moving. Other benefits include reducing conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles, increased likelihood of motorists yielding to pedestrians, and enhanced safety for pedestrians who may be slower to start crossing the intersection. On the left side, you can see again the car and the pedestrian stopped with the red signals. The middle panel shows the pedestrian getting their walk signal in advance of the car. And finally, the third panel shows the car getting their green ball, and they can see the pedestrian because they've moved out into the crosswalk. According to the U.S. Department of Transportation statistics from the Federal Highways Administration, leading pedestrian intervals have been shown to reduce pedestrian-involved crashes by as much as 60% at an intersection. Okay, so this slide shows the two crosswalks across San Bruno Avenue where we're recommending the leading pedestrian intervals. So the red and the blue cars would be delayed before those pedestrians entering the crosswalk. There's no significant negative impact on the operation of an intersection when you do this. Okay, so next one. Oh, okay. So the third recommendation from DKS Associates is to implement flashing yellow arrows for the left turn movements from both directions of Cherry Avenue. Flashing yellow arrow control is a form of permissive left turn control. The drivers making a left turn are still required to yield to conflicting traffic and pedestrians. The difference is that instead of seeing a green circle, the drivers are shown a flashing yellow arrow. So this slide shows the difference. You can see on the left with the permissive, they've got the green circular controls. On the right, the flashing yellow arrow. Are we going to go to the next slide? Yeah. So we want to emphasize that the traffic signals are different, but the operation is the same. And the reason we would want to do it is because studies show that yielding behavior for drivers making permissive left turns improves if flashing yellow arrows are used, and that leads to an increase in safety. There are typically no other impacts to the signal operations when you do this. There are, however, some significant changes to the actual traffic signal equipment that are required to do a flashing yellow arrow operation. Typically, new poles and new signal heads are required. Several cities in California are already using flashing yellow arrows. That includes Roseville, San Luis Obispo, Pleasanton, and Petaluma. This slide shows the current operation with the blue car, permissive operation with the green circular signal. Has to yield to the oncoming traffic. And the next slide shows that they've got the exact same thing, but they're going to get a flashing yellow arrow. So the fourth recommendation from DKS Associates is to implement a right turn overlap for the southbound right turn movement from Cherry Avenue. A right turn overlap means that the signals are modified to show a green right arrow to drivers making a southbound right turn on Cherry Avenue. They're going to do that at the same time that eastbound drivers are making a left turn from San Bruno onto Cherry. This changes the southbound right turn from a right turn on red operation to a situation where they can make the turn freely. On the slide, the yellow car is allowed to make that right turn at the same time as the red car is making their left turn. This is mostly an operational improvement. It will it'll reduce congestion at the intersection, primarily during during the PM peak when the southbound right turn is at its heaviest. So another major item that was evaluated as part of the study by DKS and was discussed during our meeting with the TSPC, but was not recommended was not recommended for implementation, is a protected left turn. Protected left turn control is when the left turn movement is allowed to proceed freely with no conflicting traffic. The driver making a protected left turn is shown a green arrow to signal to differentiate that from a permissive left turn. The next slide. This slide shows the protected left turn operation for the northbound direction. The vehicles traveling in the opposite direction, the red car and the yellow car, have a red light, while the blue cars would be shown a green arrow and allowed to turn freely. This option is worth some discussion. There was some interest in doing this from the public who spoke at the TSPC. The typical advantages of protected left turn movements are safety improvements that result from separating left turn movement from conflicting vehicle and pedestrian traffic, and increased efficiency for the left turn movement. The typical disadvantages of protected left turn movements are decreased efficiency for the other traffic movements, which could lead to an overall increase in congestion at the intersection as a whole. Possible decreases in safety at the intersection and in the surrounding area that could result from that increased congestion. And studies have shown that aggressive driving increases with the wait time as drivers become more frustrated and may potentially run through the intersection, which is part of that possible reduction in safety that could result. So it is possible to implement protected left turns either with or without the previously mentioned modification to the median on the north side of the intersection. DKS Associates evaluated both of those possibilities. This slide shows the protected left turns without modifying the median. And that table in the lower left shows some of the results of the delay study, which is telling us that the overall delay at the intersection would increase from 28.2 seconds to 36.4 seconds during the morning, and 24.1 seconds to 53.8 seconds in the afternoon. That's a pretty significant increase in congestion at the intersection as a whole. So this slide shows if we were to do the left turn, protected left turns with the median modification. And the table in the left is the similar results for the delay analysis, and it's 28.2 seconds to 33.8 seconds in the morning, 24.1 to 29.9 in the afternoon. So it's pretty obvious that the impact to congestion is a lot less if we do this in conjunction with modifying the median. DKS Associates and staff also considered the guidance from the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices on the subject of protected left turns. The MUTCD states that protected left turns should be your last option. You try to do other things before you go to a protected left turn. DKS Associates and staff also consider the ease with which the city can change from flashing yellow arrow operation to protected left turn operation. Implementing the flashing yellow arrows requires almost exactly the same type of modification to the intersection as would be needed to do a protected left turn. So by implementing flashing yellow arrows, first, the city is not committing itself to a path that will make it difficult or costly to change to protected left arrows at a later date if that becomes necessary. So to recap, DKS Associates recommends modifying the median on Cherry Avenue on the north side of the intersection to create a new southbound left turn lane. In addition to the modification of the median, DKS Associates recommends implementing flashing yellow arrows control for the left turn movements from both directions of Cherry Avenue. DKS Associates also recommends implementing a leading pedestrian interval for the two crosswalks that cross San Bruno Avenue. And DKS Associates recommends implementing a right turn overlap for the southbound direction on Cherry Avenue. And in this slide, you can see that same table on the bottom left. This is the results of the analysis for if we were to do all of those things that DKS Associates recommended. And you will see that the end result is that while we can also get the safety improvements that we would gain from modifying the median and the leading pedestrian interval and the flashing yellow arrows, but we will also see a reduction in congestion at the intersection. Staff concurs with these recommendations made by DKS Associates. And I'll let Jimmy wrap it up.
Thanks. So back last...
I'm sorry, Jimmy. I apologize.
Sure.
Keep going.
Okay, thanks. So back last month, staff presented the results of the intersection study to the TSBC Committee for consideration and recommendations. And all the recommendations provided to you today were accepted by the TSBC. And the TSBC further recommended that the improvement process be expedited for completion and not to allow concerns about other activities in the area delay the work at the intersection. So in addition, the TSBC requested that staff evaluate angling the crosswalks across San Bruno Avenue in order to improve the ability of drivers to see the pedestrians waiting on the south side of the intersection. Staff will evaluate expediting both the implementation of the leading pedestrian interval and angling crosswalks recommendations to determine whether there are any impacts to existing facilities at the intersection. So the leading pedestrian interval can be quickly converted if the existing signal controller is capable of handling the changes. And based on the current field observations, the angling crosswalk will lengthen the pedestrian crossing and will locate them further out into the intersection. So staff is not currently recommending the changes to the crosswalks at this time, and will need to continue to evaluate the recommendation to determine the feasibility. So as Michael mentioned, staff concurs with both DKS and TSBC recommendations are here tonight to seek council review and direction regarding further work to implement the recommendations. The estimated cost for the design and construction for these improvements is approximately $450,000, and the schedule to complete the work is roughly 16 months. Currently, there are no fiscal impact associated with this report. Once we receive council's direction and recommendations, staff will issue a request for proposal for design services and return to council to award the contract. This concludes our presentation, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Michael. Questions, comments from council?
So I'll start. Thank you. Public comments.
I don't know. For you, of course. No, you could do now or wait for whichever you wish. Mr. Mersey.
Ryan Mersey, Keynes Avenue. I wish to support some of the design plans. The leading pedestrian would be great. I have lived in that area since 1971. And I have seen, before it was even built, and I have seen the dangers increase year after year as a pedestrian and as a motorist. I wish to support the turn bay at the north end, and but I would really recommend that we not go for the flashing yellow light, that we have a completely protected two left-hand turn lanes. And the reason why is that just one accident costs the city $250,000 if we're sued as our insurance premium. We're very lucky that we haven't been sued by people at that intersection blaming the city for the mess that it is so far. I think we should do it correctly and get it done once and for all. Thank you.
Anybody else from the audience? Okay. So, council comments, questions? Oh, Laura, I'm sorry, it was back to you.
That's okay, thank you. So, like residents that just spoke here, I do live in the area, and I have seen an increase in near misses One of the elements that wasn't really discussed here tonight is that you're driving downhill at a high rate of speed on a lot of cars. So cars going northbound from Cherry, crossing the intersection, are kind of stuck. And sometimes what they do is they come out into the center of the intersection and wait for that left turn lane. So a lot of the added recommendations are good. You've got the right turn going on the south direction, so it takes that element away. You now know they're coming straight, so it takes that element away. But I just don't see drivers going north, not entering that intersection and kind of sitting there in this no man's land. They're stuck. And cars coming down, I worry as they come through that they're going to actually stop. We've got to make improvements. I agree with that. I think that the 3 to 4 second delay for the pedestrians crossing is a great idea. I think that's an added benefit. I do like the modified median. I think that's an added benefit as well. I think that's an excellent suggestion because, as we know, we're going to see an increase in vehicles traveling south from Cherry. I tend to travel that area a lot, and I could be 3 cars back and still get stuck at the red light. So I'm at a red light, only a couple cars get through trying to make that left turn, and I'm the 3rd car, and I can't make the signal. So there is definitely a need for improvements at that intersection. So I'd like to hear from the other council members, but I question because probably over a year ago I wrote a letter to the traffic and safety. Why can't we just duplicate what we see at El Camino and Genevan? Why can't we have an intersection where we have protected left turns? You're crossing El Camino from Genevan to El Camino, and each direction has it protected. But I like this direction as well. So I guess I'm kind of torn on both. So I'd like to hear from the rest.
Mike.
Thank
your
you.
light was- Yes.
Sure. So I just want to thank staff and the committee for doing some really. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here, and as somebody who walks and runs in the area, I think that there are some improvements needed, and I really like the pedestrian advanced warning there to get into the sidewalk because it is the visibility is an issue and the rate of speed is really high. So I'm generally in favor of everything that is being proposed here. One concern about the flashing yellows is that they are still a bit uncommon, and I'm wondering if people might be confused when Caltrans put in the flashing reds on El Camino and Millbrae. A lot of people had no idea what to do. It was Stanley Roberts did a thing on Cron 4. People didn't know whether to stop or keep going or wait for it to stop flashing. So maybe we could do a little, outreach in terms of just letting people know. A lot of people on Nextdoor were asking, what do we do with these lights? So maybe we get ahead of that by getting some information out there. And I would be supportive of trying out these yellows. And if they're not adequate, then it's a quick change. Thank you.
Other questions, comments?
Oh, I like all the improvements. I also travel there a great deal, and whatever we do, we're going to have to make it very clear for people because anything is going to be a big change for people who've traveled this 40 or 50 years. And I think one of the most difficult things about it is that on the south side, the lanes are one way. You have a dedicated left lane and then a right and straight, and then on the other side it doesn't. So I think that's a lot of confusion too. So whatever we decide, or if we go ahead with all of these improvements, let's make sure that we also include some signage ahead of those things, like a right only, a left only, whatever's going to be a change, because I think it's going to cause a lot of hesitation and jerkiness as we go forward. I was thinking about the Genevan El Camino light change. The difficulty with that is, as you watch people, they don't going west. They don't know that, or they're stopped, and then the people turning left onto El Camino are like, well, are they coming? Are they going? Or because there's no arrow. So I think the arrow itself is the important part. I'm not sure about the flashy yellows either. I kind of like just the green, but you guys are the experts. So if you think the yellow should do it, I don't like it. I want a green. Sorry, I vote for green.
San Francisco too, right? San Francisco uses the turning yellow light.
I don't know. They're saying yes. Marty.
Thank you. Could you go back to the slide where the fully protected, how much more time that would take? So another 5 seconds on average, maybe 6, 5, for that much more additional safety. My priority is safety. I understand we could modify it as we move forward, but I want to move forward with the project. I think a 5-second delay is probably worth somebody getting that extra little bit of time to get safely through the intersection, and the delay on the person is well worth it. People are going to adjust their behavior. The yellow is going to be funky, and that one funky time, boom, is it worth it? So I definitely want to do the project. I'm leaning towards, no, I think it's 5 seconds. If you need to wait 5 seconds longer to make sure you can make that left-hand turn without any worry, I mean, it is protected, and I think that's a cleaner, more secure option. And people have to adjust and know that, leave home, leave 5 minutes earlier if you want to get to through that intersection, because all of this doesn't include the additional traffic from YouTube's expansion, right? This is currently what we're dealing with, right?
That's correct.
So, yeah, I want to see protected turns. I think it's important enough.
Obviously, the TSPC, the Citizens Committee that we appoint, did not recommend this. Why was that? Or was it the yellow?
The TSPC recommended the flashing yellows.
Right, no, the protected.
Not protected. And
Correct.
the reason
Why?
is because of the easy conversion at a later time we want to do it, and it goes with what the California MUTCD recommends as well. They want agencies to try some other measures first before going directly to the the last option.
And with the flashing yellow too, I'm having the. I think we all are. It's just change.
Right, and there's operational effects too with the protected left turn, as you see here with the time delay.
So that was that part of their concern as well? Was
I just would like to comment a little also.
Please.
So your thoughts are very accurate in terms of it's 5 seconds, right? That's what we're talking about. But that I want to point out that's an overall delay for the intersection. What we're really going to see is that it's going to be an improvement in delay for the left turns probably. These left turn movements are going to actually have an easier time making it. But we're going to see more than a 5-second increase in delay for just about everybody else, and that's how it's going to kind of average itself back out. So I just want to make sure we understand that we're not just talking about like 5 seconds more for the guys going straight through on San Bruno. Their actual increase for them is probably going to be more than 5, 7. It's hard to say until I don't have that breakdown. And the other thing I want to comment is this does not include the YouTube traffic. But what I would expect in terms of where that YouTube traffic is going to go is it's not going to show a whole lot of an increase in these two particular left turn movements. It's probably going to be an increase in left turns going eastbound on San Bruno into the business park, and then right turns coming back out. So in a similar fashion, we make these two left turns better, yes. When the YouTube traffic comes in, these two left turns will have some benefit to that, but it's actually going to be that traffic's going to be part of the traffic that's experiencing the increased congestion level that will be because of the left turn. protected left turns. So just keep that in mind also as part of your thinking.
Irene, did you have, and then Marty. Irene?
Well, I had two questions. Well, if the yellow permissive is better, then certainly do that. But why 16 months? Why is it going to take us 16 months to do this? Or the estimate on it?
It's an estimate. You know, we have to get the intersection designed. The modification of the median has some design, but that needs to be done. There's a light pole there that needs to be relocated, or some electrical design possibly that needs to be done, as well as possible some grading work, because the roadway is currently crowned to, up to the median right now. So by cutting out a left turn lane, there may be some additional grading that needs to be done. So there's a lot, there's a little bit more to it. I know it's conservative, 16 months. It'll possibly be sooner than that.
Okay. I was just, seems like a long time.
Marty?
Right. So at what point do you need to make the final decision on flashing yellow and red as you're going through all the other things and you're getting to the design on it? That would it be something that you could do a little bit more analysis on, or it's not, it's just a little part of the work of changing a few bulbs at that point and doing some programming, but the poles themselves and the design, I'm just hoping that we can maybe get a little more clarity on those flashing yellows, because people are going to not really know what to do. And the worst thing it is, somebody's coming from behind and then somebody kind of stops and then bam, right? So I'm still going to stress the safety part of it. I mean, because, they would like us to be the guinea pigs on their new design, and then, that really didn't work out very well. There was 2 accidents in San Bruno within 2 weeks of implementing this new flashing yellow, because people kind of didn't know what to do. And anyhow, just thinking about when that critical decision to go from the protected to going to the flashing yellow, that's probably 8 months from now or so, that we have some time to kind of still be more familiar with it.
I would say that's probably true. We could delay that decision. We could start designing the rest of the improvements. The poles and everything that would be required are pretty much exactly the same. Right. So yeah, I think we could probably delay that decision until further down the road without having to delay anything else. I'd just like to comment too, one more, as far as the little confusion over what the flashing yellow arrows and how they work. I understand that there was some confusion with what Caltrans did when they turned on those pedestrian beacons along El Camino. There's one, I think, significant difference with this situation where we would actually be able to put up a sign on our pole that tells you yield on the flashing yellow arrow. That the way those pedestrian beacons were working, there wasn't a whole lot put up in terms of being able to tell people we're sitting right there what to do. We can actually, there is a sign that we would be able to put up on the pole that it's similar to the ones that used for a permissive with the green ball. It says yield on the green, with the green circle thing. We could do pretty much the same kind of a similar sign for the flashing yellow arrow. So it might help to alleviate some confusion from the drivers as to what to do when they see that.
Michael?
Good. Thank you, Rico. So I just wanted to add that we did get an email from the TSPC committee chair who couldn't be here but wanted to share his thoughts on this. And one comment that he made in his notes was that he was recommending that we go with the yellow, with the flashing yellow, because it would be easier to implement the protected turn later. However, if we implement the protected turn and then we experience backlogs in traffic there, it would be much harder to go back. In fact, he says it would be unadvisable to go back because of the habits that would already been developed. So being that it's been completely vetted by staff, it's been vetted by our committee and by the experts, I I wouldn't recommend that we go back and reanalyze this. I think we have a pretty solid recommendation, so I would recommend that we move forward with staff's recommendation.
Laura?
Councilmember Salazar, thank you so much for that comment, because I was thinking back at the same thing, reading his email, and then going back to that, this is a recommendation by a body of experts, not a council, that, this is what they do. And I think you're correct, and let's move forward. I agree with moving forward with the flashing yellow, and then make changes if needed by staff recommendation. We can do an analysis, so.
Any other? So what I'm hearing, I've heard from 2 council members to go forward with the TSPC and staff recommendation. I've also heard some other comments from my colleagues on the flashing light and then on the protected, so for the left turn. So what Marty, and because again, this is us just providing direction to staff. So Marty, anything? Were you on this?
I said go forward, and then I
Okay.
changed my green to yellow, flashing yellow.
Okay. All right, so there's 3 that want to go forward, and that's fine, with the recommendations from the TSPC and the staff, which would be then the 4 suggested improvements to move forward. Is that, and then Marty, or anything else? No. Mike? That's all right.
I respect the TSPC's knowledge and base of information, and I hear my colleagues up here. It just seems that amount of confusion for a few seconds of time is something that just wanted. It doesn't have to happen at this moment, and but I understand why everybody else thinks about that way. So I'm all right with proceeding forward.
Thank you. Staff have enough recommendation from council and understand direction?
Yeah. So the next step that staff will take is to prepare an RFP for design services, and you will see this again at the point the project has been designed and is ready to be awarded for construction.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item, comments from council members. Any council members have comments they'd like to share? Marty? No? Oh, I'm sorry, Michael? Michael?
I wanted to acknowledge the passing of a friend and a very committed member of our community, Bruce Chester, who passed away recently. On my way over to the meeting today, I stopped by to pay my respects. But Bruce was very involved in the church and in the St. Vincent de Paul Society, and I think he will be sorely missed. And so I just wanted to acknowledge his passing and his contribution to the community.
Thank you, Michael. Laura, any comments? Irene, anything? Marty?
Yes. I got 2 things. Something from YouTube, actually. They're hosting an event for training nonprofits on how to better use YouTube. This event is occurring on April 17th on their campus. It's running from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. I have a really long email address to go through here. It's yt-impactlab@google.com. So if you probably Google Impact Lab YouTube San Bruno, you probably would find a link to it. But this is for nonprofits to figure out how to better utilize YouTube services to get your message out there and to interact with the community. With that said, I have a niece that the day after Easter had to go to the hospital for a serious injury with so she's at Stanford in intensive care, and I just wanted to let her know I'm thinking about her. Nicole, get well.
Any other council comments? Marty, our thoughts and prayers will be with your niece. And Michael, as you said, Bruce Chester, I taught his kids at the rec center, so they've been fixtures of this community for a long time. So with nothing else, we will adjourn Mr. Chester's memory, and we also will meet here at the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on April 24th, 2018 at 7 p.m. right here at the San Bruno Senior Center. Everybody else, enjoy your week.